Hola YouTube. Today I'm going to be talking with you about two of my most precious memories. But before I get into all that, I have had this video camera for a year, a couple of years actually, a Canon FS recorder, and so I had asked myself one day, well, why now getting interested in all this? And aside from all the stuff that I put up on YouTube, normally where I'm playing keyboards, eventually I just said, well, you started a WordPress blog, and I can't now, it's been so long since I've been back on there that I don't even remember, how to get back there, the name of it, things like that. And two, it just seemed like this way is much easier. So, as an interesting side note, I think on the Keyboard Magazine forums, I have myself listed as either 85 keys or 85 keyboards. No. As a disclaimer, no, people. I do not have 85 keyboards. It is quite unfortunate. Although, if I did have 85 keyboards, yeah, I'd be looking a lot like NASA around here. But what I'm going to be talking about today, first up, is my excuse me, allergies. Lovely. But then again, in the mountains of East Tennessee, what can you expect? This is like the sinus capital of the world, or at least of the United States. Ugh. So, anyhow, the first time I ever got to experience the Hammond organ, it was about 6 to 8 years ago, and I had met our new preacher at the time. This was a different church than I attend now. I play at Lawson's Chapel on the Hills Union United Methodist Circuit. But back then, I went to Fox, and our preacher at the time, Mariel Myers, she was from Virginia, and knew a mission team. The group went by the name of Healing in His Wings. Although the members were Jim Angle, he was a preacher, his wife Sharon played the organ, and their friends David and Lisa Marks. David played the piano, and Lisa would sing. So, the first time I ever met them, I wanted Mariel to let me know when they would be, and they would be showing up, so I could help them set up all their equipment. And but before all this, I had heard the lush, warm sound of a Hammond, although I didn't know at the time what it was. And so, years ago, the memories have started to fade, unfortunately. But she calls me, and I go over, and we had lunch before we sat up, and so I take them up to the church, and I show them, where they can set stuff up. It's kind of like a tour guide, just so they would get the feel of the place, etc., etc. The one thing I can remember most is Jim coming over to one spot. Couldn't have been more than about this wide. And he says, yep, the organ can sit right here. At the time I'm thinking, can sit right here? Hope it's a small organ. Well, I was pleasantly surprised. Any of y'all who remember the old Hammonds, the old B3s and C3s, they are not small. So they finally got it loaded in and got the Leslie brought in, and Sharon showed me how to turn the thing on, and So after the performance that night, or rather the service, we enjoyed it, but the real performance was for God. But she showed me a little bit about how to play the organ, and I was really, really keen on learning all I could about the instrument. And I think at the time I had only had maybe 2 to 3 years of piano lessons at the time. And so we play, and so the next night they were either doing a prayer circle or walking around talking to people. I don't know what. But I go up and I turn on the organ for her. And it was, any of y'all who remember the old B3s will remember the 2 switches that you had to press one, hold it for about 6 seconds to start up the motor, and then the second for about 6 seconds to run the tone generator. And really for me of interest, it just blows me away to this day that there are motors one motor, but still inside a motor inside an organ, a real honest to goodness motor. And then all the work on that, having to get the organ in place and then loosen the bolts on the motor, so that I imagine it would have been like inside of the organ while it was running, there would have been this kind of little shimmy, just ever so slightly in the motor. And so I turn the organ on and play some notes, and just cannot believe my ears. No offense, Jim and Sharon. To my credit, I thought I had broken the organ. But it sounded awful. In the midst of these musical tones, were what I can only describe as Rice Krispies. Yes, it literally sounded like a bunch of snaps, crackles, and pops coming from that Leslie speaker. And so, I think I've broken the organ, think something's wrong. Sharon finally comes over, says, "No, Adam, it just takes time for these tubes to warm up." And so, the tubes finally warmed up, and it was great. They played, and the one thing that really blew my mind at the time, and I had to look twice, as Jim was preaching, I kept thinking, I hear the organ. But why do I hear the organ? He's preaching. And my eyes were on him most of the night. And then I finally look over at Sharon, and yep, she was actually playing the organ ever so softly as he was preaching. Had never experienced that in a church service again. But it was like the most natural thing in the world. And so I feel right home with Church of God and Pentecostals. Although, considering that Church of God, I think, came out of the United Methodist Church, that shouldn't be too surprising. Anyhow, that's one memory. I can remember telling Sharon one time, it was maybe the next year or the next 2 years or so after the first time I met them, telling her, they do make the organs a lot louder now. Well, she said, yeah, Adam, but they're toys. Well, to me, unfortunately, as much as I would enjoy having this organ, the Hammond SK2. As things are, this damn time, many of us know, it's sad. I'm sure like many of y'all out there, I'm sure there are some out there who are more well off than a lot of the rest of us. But, you know, in my experience, sadly, personally, me and my mama, we work, we sweat, we cry, and we get nowhere. Nowhere. But, yeah. Luis, okay, it is what it is. Qué triste. Ah, well. But, you know, I believe that someday I'm going to have the SK2 or whatever next model Hammond decides to come up with. But more precious than the first time I ever met Jim and the Mission team was whenever I had first, this was actually before Hammond released the SK2, sometime last year, 2 years ago. I was up at Mama's and Papa's, and she was telling me about her love as well of the organ, really just any kind of organ. And I can remember her telling me about time when she was younger. She would be in church, and from what I gathered, it was like almost like what the Methodist circuit riders used to do. How they would go around from church to church on horseback, and they wouldn't be. It would be quite a time gap between one church to the next. So, horse and buggy or not, although considering the number of years ago that was, and that's all I'm going to say there. But regardless of method of transport, she would tell me of the preacher and his wife who would come in, and the wife would play the organ. So they'd come in and they would have a table or something set up to put the organ on. And, you know, I would imagine if many of y'all or any of y'all remember those old suitcase roads, something like that probably. Maybe not without all that weight, or maybe not with all that weight, but then maybe there was all that weight. I don't know. But it has been a dream of mine. You know, my grandparents are up in their 80s. And this is so much that I would consider this almost like my personal last song. And for any of y'all who've read the book, then you'll know this, but for those of you who haven't read the book, sorry. Spoiler alert. But the reason I say that it would be like my last song, there at the end of the book, Ronnie unboards the piano and plays something for her dad. It was, best I can remember, it was a piece that he had started, and she finished. And about halfway toward the end of the piece, her dad dies. And although, you know, I wouldn't want it to be exactly like that for me, Lord no. You know, they're just getting on up in years, that it would be a dream of mine to not even have the SK2 here, not even go ahead and unpack the thing, but not even set it up. Put it in the case, take a stand, and an expression pedal, and pedals if I had them, and drive up to Mama's and Papa's, and just stay there for most of the day, half the night. Maybe even stay there the whole night, I don't know. But just play, and play, and play, and play, and play, and play, and play. Run through all the hymns I know, run through stuff I don't even know. Make up stuff that I've never played before. Pero la gente puede soñar, but people can dream. So, in a nutshell, that, not quite a nutshell, a big, long, deep nutshell, maybe. My two favorite memories. So, you all will most certainly be seeing more of my mug up here on YouTube. So, I'll talk to all you later. Adios.